All right, thank you everybody for coming to this. I'm very excited about it. Voting rights, filibuster, these are big issues going on right now. In Arizona, we have a lot of different legislative proposals going through there, as is the case in other parts of the country. And our guest tonight is Mr. DaMond Holt. Might be mispronouncing your first name there. I apologize. And I was hoping, Mr. Holt, if you could just tell us a little about yourself and your experience to get us started.
Well, thank you for having me. It's truly an honor for me to be here to speak for you before you on some very hot topics that's in our nation and our community, and most definitely dealing with voters' rights and dealing with the filibuster and all of that. So just to give you a little bit about myself, I'm born and raised Flint, Michigan. I live here in the city of Tucson, Arizona. I am the pastor of the Pilgrim Rest Missionary Baptist Church. I am the president of the Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance, known as the IMA of Tucson, the board president of the Tucson Urban League, which is one of our civil rights organizations outside of the NAACP. I am the chairperson of the Pima County Sheriff's Advisory Review Board that works with the Sheriff Department to review deputy discipline and deputy shootings and things of that nature. I sit on the advisory council of Mayor Romero's Advisory Council for Race, Equity, and Justice. I have two masters, one in theology and one in counseling. I have a PhD in psychology, and my postdoctoral work is on trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. I am a national expert on trauma. Actually, tomorrow I'll be flying out again, training on how incarceration impacts the brain and how some people can get PTSD by being incarcerated. Most of my work is on early childhood trauma. I am a certified traumatologist. I am a trauma crisis specialist. I am a hypnotherapist that specializes in trauma and PTSD. I don't mind being called Mr. Holt, but I am Dr. Holt by every right. And it's good to be here. I'm the founder of the Fresh Start initiative that helps formerly incarcerated individuals who have a felony record to get back on their feet. And so most definitely when we talk about these different topics, is very passionate for me. So that's a little bit about myself. My resume is pretty extensive, but I don't want to sound narcissistic and talk so much about me. So glad to have you, glad to be with you guys, and let's get it.
Okay, I have one big, broad question for you.
Sure.
Looking out at the landscape, we have all these different voting rights bills going through. Some are aiming to be more restrictive, some to be less restrictive. Could you kind of just give us your take on what's happening in the country right now in terms of voting rights?
Right now in voting rights, we have a lot of tension, and it's because there's a lot that has been that is at stake, that has been at stake, and we also have a lot of myths and a lot of lies that's been put out. And coming from our former president, President Trump, in regards to talking about that there's the system has been rigged, and that's kind of like red meat thrown at to a particular demographic of our country that's looking for things of that nature, and even individuals from that was appointed from his own administration has cleared that there has not been any massive rigging going on with our election system, but because of the fact that it has come from him, and it has come from many people in his circle and his voting demographic. People have ran on that, and not just ran on that, but it has impacted a lot of our states, a lot of our governor races and state office races, and people have ran on that rhetoric. And as a result, it also created fear, because some people really don't know what's the real data of what's going on. So what's popular, what's going on with the constantly hearing, they say, well, hey, let's stop all of this rigging going on, and let's create new legislation that would create more restrictions on voting, which we already had states that were already strategically and systemically having their type of strategies on suppressing votes. But this is kind of like, this is no more covert type of work. This is in your face, like, we don't care what you think, and we're going to do all we can to suppress the vote. So you have that rhetoric about the rigging, and so people say, let's create the new legislation, more, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it sounds ludicrous and sounds stupid, we will give you a felony for giving someone a cup of water for standing in line. I mean, just all the crazy things you've heard in regards to these things. So you have that part, but then you have communities of color that say, wait a minute, we've been here before. We remember in the Jim Crow days, we remember in the civil rights days, that there was, even it's going back to slavery, when emancipated slaves were emancipated, and they were free, no longer being slaves, they were also being threatened not to even dare think about voting, or that could be your life, that could be a lynching, that could be, you could get hung for just things of that nature. So you have the communities of color that's been having flashbacks about this, like, hey, we've been here before, and this is what you've heard President Joe Biden say, Jim Crow 2.0. We've been here before. These are nothing but policies to suppress the vote, intimidate African Americans and poor Americans in our country to not get out there and get in a line to vote. So those are some of the things that I have the pleasure of speaking into, and they're very real in our country.
And there's kind of like a movement against that as well, right? People are kind of resisting those types of changes. Could you give us a sense, like at the federal level, we have like the John Lewis Act, we have those types of legislation. Could you kind of tell us, like, what do you think the impact of those laws would be?
It would be tragic because, yes, we're not a perfect country. And we know that slavery and racism is one of our country's greatest sins, and we're still trying to address that. And we had a lot of heroes that have sacrificed their life and poured a lot of blood and sweat and tears into getting a civil rights legislation in the 1960s, and to reverse a lot of that hard work would be devastating to the pioneers and heroes that have lived before us to get us to where we are. And we still have a lot of work to do. So we still need additional legislations to make sure that voters are secure. There's no intimidation. I think it was some group saying, hey, at some polls, we're going to intimidate. We're going to roll up and sit in our trucks and our guns, and we're just going to stare at people, just to intimidate the vote, not even coming out. And so it would be really tragic to our nation if we start going in reverse and start going back to the good old days, where only a particular type or a particular demographic of our country will get out to vote. And that's the whole thing, because people are intimidated by the power of the voting box. Things get done by voting. And so if you take that away, you have a certain group of people that lust for power will remain to stay in power and not be questioned.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of nuances to this. So you're talking about very broad historical, very important trends here. I wanted to share a little bit like my own personal experience. It's much less dramatic, but I still have it where there seem to be so many rules about voting. I think a lot of people think about voting and it's just you walk up to a place, you put your ballot in and you're done. And then upon closer look, it's a pretty complicated process. I have the experience a couple of years ago where I moved, still within Tucson, but I had to change my address. Or I was supposed to have changed my address. I didn't do it. I went to the polling place, I put in my ballot, and I had to do a provisional ballot. And it ended up being counted, but I had some time there where I was very stressed that because of some tiny little paperwork thing, my vote wasn't going to be counted. And, that's not a super dramatic thing, but it does cause me stress. And I don't like the feeling of having my vote possibly being, canceled because of some tiny little thing. And then I look and it seems at a lot of our elections, on election day, you will see video of places like Atlanta, where people are waiting in line for 8 hours to vote. And it's absolutely horrendous. We had a similar experience up in Maricopa County with a lot of like Latino dominant areas a few years ago. And I was wondering if you have any insight or just like, how can that be? How is it developed that there's a situation where some people have to spend 8 hours in line? That seems absurd to me.
Um, I've never in my life had to spend hours upon hours upon hours. Again, I'm from Michigan, so these rules look different from state to state. But however, there are some common denominators that's very similar, like a Arizona and a Georgia, especially with the high political climate out of both states. Being red, shifting to maybe purple or bluish. So there's a lot at stake in those big states. And so both of those states as well is being highlighted in regards to voter suppression. And believe it or not, some things look like the system is broken. I don't think a lot of these systems are broken. I think a lot of these systems are strategically covert in place to create extra stress, to covertly discourage people not to stand in line for 8 hours, or making people think like maybe they got to take a PTO time off from work because it's just going to be an all dayer. Just about, I believe that a lot of those are strategic to discourage because if it was any other agency and there was gridlock, we could easily remove all of the bureaucracy that clogs up the pipeline to make it more accessible and make it much easier. But it looks different from state to state. Some states, you're not having these issues. And then some things are county to county. And some counties, is just not like that. But when you have some of these states that are known for strategizing to make voting a really stressful big deal, it's no secret that we are having those type of issues. Same way in Maricopa County as well. Even threats. I mean, threats to election officers and election supervisors. We're having election supervisors say, "That's it. I'm done. I'm not risking my life. It's not worth it. I'm out," and they're resigning from their post. I believe, wasn't it? Is it Texas? That in regards to voting, I believe there's something on the lines that some states, and maybe Texas or another state, but I know there's some states out there that they have put a provision within the legislature that if they feel that there's some elections that's not fair, that legislating body can make a decision on the election, on who wins and who does not. That's too much power. There's just so much room for disaster for something like that. So this is just the climate that we are in, and this is just the beginning. We still have other states that are trying to follow through with some of those same type of election practices. So we have a lot to be concerned about, and we do have to make our voice be heard at that box.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm seeing similar things as you are, and it's very, very concerning to me. Do you see a way out of this?
Oh, you guys a big question.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah.
Do I see a way out? Yes. The what, the how, and the when is where the big question mark is. And the way out, it might not even be in my lifetime. It could be in the next generation. But there is a way out. Our system of government is just so galvanizing at this time. And we are to the extreme left, extreme right, and we're not coming to the center to get things done. I don't know any job that pays a six-figure income and you don't do your job and you still get a direct deposit. I mean, you help me. I don't know no position, whether if it's public sector, government, or private sector, that you can make six-figure and don't do your job and publicly make it clear you will not do your job and you still get a check every pay period. That's what you call Congress. And I've never seen that before. They are the legislator and we have to hold them accountable to do their job. And we have to start asking those additional questions, like, having, Crystal Cinema, really hoodwink people with her practices and her decisions. And we have to hold people accountable and make sure that that we are soberly and strategically making sure we're getting the right people in those offices. And I think that when they come to our churches, when they come to MLK events and want to speak, and when they come to Black History Heritage events and want to have something to say, you better believe that I'm going to hold you accountable. You come in my neck of the woods talking about you're going to do something and don't do it. We have to hold people accountable. And I think that when we start doing those things, we can begin to see a light at the end of the tunnel. But if we allow this stuff that's going on right now, it is really, really tragic for our nation. We have to get to the point of getting some things done. We did not get the George Floyd Act done. We have to get things done. The voters' right, we have to get that done. We got to quit talking about it. We have to get to communicating, talking, and that means sometimes between political parties, from conservative to liberal, we have to find things that we can agree on. We will never agree on every little single thing, but we have to do things the right way, not because it's Democrat or Republican, it's just the American way. And we are Americans first. And at the end of the day, regardless of color of our skin and regardless of our political parties, we care about our families. We want our communities to be better. We want our communities to be safe. We want to be able to do the things that we want to do and live out our God-given tenet. And so at some point, as a nation, we need to understand this makes our communities better, and these things make our nation better.
And I can tell you from the letters to the editor that we get almost daily, that there is a lot of interest in this, and there's people want to have this discussion. So I hope that it does bear fruit in some way. But I was thinking this might be a moment if we can, we have some questions from the readers. I don't know, Sarah, if you want to ask some of those.
Yeah, so from David Fitzsimmons, I'm sure a few of you know him on our team. He asks, first off, how did you become an activist?
I became an activist because I felt like there needs to be more done that speaks to issues that concern my generations and generations of tomorrow. Then number two, I became an activist is because I didn't want to sit around and just be part of the complainers and the mumblers that's going on in our country. And then number three, I think the big one is, and I always use this metaphor even when I'm doing training, is there's a difference between a thermometer and a thermostat. And Dr. King talked about that. A thermometer just tells you what's wrong, tells you the temperature, but the thermostat has the power to shift the atmosphere and maintain the atmosphere. So I don't want to be a thermometer to just talk about what's wrong, but I want to be that thermostat that's solutions driven, that wants to shift the negative to the positive. And it takes a village. Bring our village together, regardless of our differences. Just because we're different don't mean we have to be divided in this country. And I think that there is a power and there's an energy that uses our differences to make us be divided as a community and as a country. And what is chicken soup if it was only pepper? What is chicken soup if it was only garlic powder? It's the differences of the different spices that makes a beautiful dish to eat upon. And so that's how our community has to be. Just because one community is garlic powder and the other one is black pepper and the other one is seasoning salt, don't mean we divide. No, we bring all those seasons together and we make this really, really good, delicious comfort food called chicken soup.
Are you saying variety is the spice of life?
Yes.
And then as a twofold question, is there money behind voter repression, and are the voter repression laws reversible?
Yes, most definitely there's money. Everything comes from a funding source and dark money and different corporations and things of that nature. Most definitely, to answer your question, yeah, there's millions and probably even billions of dollars to keep this rhetoric going, to keep the suppression, voter suppression going, to put millions of dollars in certain candidates to sway them in a certain direction to keep voter suppression laws and policies in place. So yes, there is a big money issue in regards to that too. Can this be disrupted and dismantled? Can it be repealed? The answer is yes. I believe that we have to keep the pressure on, making sure that we have the powers that be at the decision-making table, seeing that this is hurting our nation. This is hurting our communities, in particular communities of color and poor communities are getting the bad end of the stick in regards to these policies. And we also have to push for new upcoming candidates that's coming along and letting them know that these are policies and legislations that are dear to our heart, and we're looking for even new legislators and political leaders that comes into office to be pushing this to make sure that the reality of our nation and the reality of our country is that it is anchored and embedded with equality and equity and justice.
Thank you. A question from Kathy Donahue. Why isn't the 15th Amendment employed more to enforce voting rights?
That's a good question. A lot of times when it comes to enforcement, that's going to be on our executive branch side, that's going to be on our judicial side as well, with our courts are coming in, and also a little bit from the DOJ, the Justice Department, through the Attorney General's office to help enforce a lot of these laws. But there is a lot of power behind the scenes that is stopping a lot of this type of enforcement going on that would help a lot of these drives. Remember, I was talking about the system is not really rigged. It's intentional, and these systems are in power to continue to stop movement and to stop progress. But we can, again, if we hold our powers that be in position, like our Attorney General's office, we can be writing to him and assistant U.S. attorneys and prosecutors who has the power to already prosecute and enforce laws that's already on the table. Letting our attorney generals know, our county prosecutors, all the state, federal levels know that these laws are on the book and we can do more when we actually have laws that are there to enforce.
Thank you. Willie Dickerson asks, what solutions do you recommend to bring us together and to get Congress moving, both parties?
Creating platforms where we can come together regardless of our differences. A lot of times when we have something that is specifically liberal, and then we have some things that are specifically conservative. And I think that we need to have groups where we just come together and we find common ground. And there is a lot of common ground, but we just focus so much on our differences, so no one comes together. And there's a lot of power that helps solidify that divide. But number one, I would say my recommendation is find a way where we can, the whole village can come together and we can talk about those issues. Now, I have some great friends that are conservative, and we know that in some ideologies, we're just not going to agree on. But we don't walk away upset. We don't walk away say that's my enemy. We don't walk away saying that's an adversary. To me, it's just we see things in a two different light. But one common thing is we do want our country to continue to be a place for opportunities. We do agree that all of us agree that we want our country to continue to be an economy superpower, has the most powerful military on the planet. We do believe that we want our communities to be safe. We want revitalize educational systems and school systems. We want more opportunities for our kids to be able to get a great education, create generational wealth, becoming entrepreneurs. I mean, so there's so many things that we can be coming together on as a nation that we do agree on. And whether you're white or black, rich or poor, Latino, Native, or Asian, we all of our communities can benefit on some of the things that I just said. If we find those commonalities where we can come together, regardless of our political affiliations, we can get a lot of things done. Too, I don't think we question candidates enough. For whatever reason, I don't think we get into the devils of the details of asking about their policies and asking about what motivate them. And when they say they're going to do something for our communities, you have a right to call them on the carpet and make sure that they're doing the right things. And if they don't, you fire them. They have collected so many checks and they have not given you not one law since they in their first term. Get rid of them jokers.
I just want to add to that for a second. You're talking about, asking the questions of our legislators, our political leaders. I think probably across the entire country, a lot of these people, these state legislators who are proposing these bills, they kind of skate through the election season a little bit. And I definitely think that like the Star, all the other newspapers, everybody, we would just be doing such a service to the public if we did drill down with each of these candidates and get really to the heart of it. I think that's absolutely right.
Rid of them. You're fired. You're out of here, buddy. You've collected so many direct deposits of a big check from our taxes, and you have not done your job. Get rid of them. And not just the paper. Unions are very powerful. We need to be having our unions from every level challenging, because they ask for union endorsements. If unions didn't have no power, they wouldn't want their endorsements. Our unions need to be coming back and pushing back and saying, hey, you're lacking on some deliverables. There's some things that you can be doing. If not, then either don't run again, or we primary every single legislator that promised something. I don't care if they're Republican or Democrat. If they don't deliver, we create a primary to eliminate it.
DaMond, Dave Fitzsimmons here. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I want to tell you, I admire your patriotic activism. And I really am curious, kind of specifically about you as a young man. What really pushed you into, I guess, walking through that door or saying, I want to be an activist, I want to participate? And secondly, if people agree with you here and they want to join the cause, are there a number of groups that they might consider joining?
Let me ask you a first question. What was it? What really? No.
Yeah, what happened to you as a kid, man?
Well, I'm from the hood of Flint, Michigan. So I'm from the hood. So I'm a survivor of many things. So number one, I'm not scared. And I think that in these times, you can't be scared. And when I look at those that have laid a foundation before me, and we looked at Dr. King and all of his sacrifices, and Malcolm X and all of his sacrifices, Medgar Evers, and all of those who have paved the way before us. It took a lot of tenacity. And at the time, you got to think Dr. King, Malcolm X was getting phone calls, getting threats, homes were being bombed, churches were being bombed. So I come from a community that's not scared. Now, I'm not stupid. We know that there are real threats out there, right? But you do have to have a level of being a lion and going out into the wild and standing up for the voiceless. And so that's the reason why I do what I do, is because there's a system that is systemic, it is institutional, and it is structural. And why everybody else is playing a checkers game, people like me got to play this wise chess game and be strategic. So you have to have tenacity. You have to stand up. I was always, another reason why I do what I do, because I was always told that public service is the rent that we pay to live on this beautiful planet. And so that's one of my core values. So every single thing I do is public service. And And I know that in regards to public service, there are many poor people, there are many disadvantaged people, disenfranchised people, marginalized people who don't have a voice. And because that they're not represented in executive branches, in city halls, at the Capitol and the legislature, that somebody has to stand up and say, look at here, we're going to speak truth to power, and we're not scared of nobody. And if you want to maintain in your job, then you're going to have to do your job, or you need to step aside. So that's how really I got into activism. I didn't have anybody in my family that do anything like me. I'm the first of my breed and my generation to tread these type of waters. I didn't come from a generational lineage of pioneers that were civil rights lawyers or anything like that. And I think the big thing of it is I felt like I didn't choose it. I felt like this has chosen me, and I've been called to do it. And so I'm 110% committed to public service, to speak for the voiceless and to stand up for the poor.
Oh, and the other question was about groups that people might look at, they might want to join or to help and to participate in the cause.
Yeah, so we still have our traditional groups. Our number one historical civil rights organization, the NAACP. The NAACP is constantly soliciting people. My sister over there, Dr. Shamee Meeks, is the president of the Tucson chapter of the NAACP. So reach out to her office. They do have some community offices, such as, I believe, a political action and the criminal justice office. I'm the president of the IMA. We have 8 domains, from education, from business, from arts and culture, but we do have a political action domain, and we have a criminal justice domain. And we're always asking people if they really want to become a solution and join a movement and join a historical organization. Most definitely, you can join the IMA's criminal justice or the political action domain. And then thirdly, I'll be leaving. I'm on my last term as the board president for the Tucson Urban League. So I'm terming out, but we do have a civil rights, social justice committee with the Urban League as well. And Urban League is our second historical civil rights organization that have stood against injustice and inequality. So those are 3 that I know of that's tried and true, and that have been tested by the fire, and they are still here. And so those will be some great opportunities.
Someone also suggested, maybe you can speak to that. Guy suggested, his name is Guy. I'm not saying he's a guy. Guy says, the Arizona chapter of the Poor People's Campaign is developing and connected to the national group, a leader in this effort. And he provided the link to that as well.
Right on.
Let's see, another question. Let me scroll back up to it. From Thomas, do you support voter ID, and what form should it take?
That's a good question. I don't have a problem with you trying to identify to make sure John Doe is John Doe or Jane Doe is Jane Doe. I have no issue with that, and that makes a lot of sense, right? But when it's a strategy to marginalize people, and it's a strategy to disenfranchise people, I think that that's where the purpose of the IDs are in question. And I think that when it goes into that direction where it's disenfranchising people or discouraging people to vote, that's where I have a problem with. But I don't have a problem with if you know, just to identify yourself. That's called common sense policies. You know, if you're Robert Williams, you know, we don't need you misrepresenting someone, and that's not you. And so if the ID can help us in making sure that it's that individual before they go to the ballot box, I'm absolutely 100% okay with that. And I think most Americans would be. But we also do know that there have been some strategies to create extra IDs, and sometimes the policies is really not clear. And there's some more devils in the details and make it a little tricky, where it can discourage people. And so that's where I would have an issue with.
So Gail asks a question. She says, more than 3/4 of Arizona's vote by mail, and now Pima County has gone to voting centers. How does mail voting and non-precinct based voting make it easier for voters?
I don't have all the answers to that. I think that we're still trying to develop what that looks like. Because just remember the last major election, we were able to do mail-in ballots, and it ended up being very successful in one eye, but then when it created a landslide in regards to how the other party didn't get that advantage, it became to be a problem. So trying to revamp that to get everybody to the ballot, I think we're still trying to sketch that out. So I don't have exact details on what that would look like as of right now, because we're still trying to peel the layers of the onion in that issue.
I'm trying to make it through these questions. Some of them are kind of repeating, so combining. A question from Jim asks, how does your position as a faith leader influence your activist role?
Oh, most definitely. Very easy to me. Jesus Christ was not just a gospel preacher. He was a reformer. And he stood up for the poor, and he stood up for the voiceless. When the Sanhedrin court, which was a very political religious sect that was made up of Sadducees, Pharisees, and scribes, those religious leaders also were very rich and wealthy people. That's how they even got a seat at the Sanhedrin court. But when they would create laws and policies that were so strict that it was marginalizing the poor in the Jewish community, Jesus stood up for that. And a lot of people don't just see Jesus as an activist, they just see him as a teacher, as a rabbi, as a prophet, and as the Messiah. But they better believe there was some political action in the movement of Jesus Christ, and he made it very clear. And so I believe that I don't think gospel preachers have to be solely political, because I don't think that that's the mission of faith leaders and gospel preachers. But there is an avenue where politics is marginalizing and disenfranchising people. Then the role of the pastor have to shift from pastor to the office of the prophet. And that's when we are a prophetic voice, when we speak truth to power. In the book of Kings, it was Elijah that was a prophet that had to speak to governmental administrations by the name of King Ahab. And so we do have presidents through Old Testament and New Testament scripture where there are times where God's messenger have to speak truth to power to make a difference. And so that's where I lie in, is that when I see politics is at a point where it's marginalizing, disenfranchising people, then it is the faith leader's job is to speak truth to power. Matter of fact, it's our congregations, the people of power is coming to. So yes, I'm going to also hold your tail accountable for what you promise.
So if I could encourage everybody to please take advantage of asking your questions in the chat. That way we can, filter them. We're not going to be necessarily calling on, people with their virtual hands today. But I think we could probably go on for like an entire hour about voting rights. But should we transition, Kurt?
Yes, to the filibuster.
Yeah, because I think that could be another hour. We should have maybe
Sure.
thought of that and separated it, but.
Yeah, so the filibuster is another thing that the readers of the Star opinion pages are going to have seen, that we have a lot of letters to the editor dealing with the filibuster, and then particularly with Senator Sinema. So I don't know, Dr. Holt, if you have any thoughts on the filibuster, or perhaps its history, or what do you think its role is right now?
Sure, why not? I tell you for free without no charge. So a lot of people think about filibuster about today, last 20, 30, maybe 60 years ago, but people don't realize the filibuster goes all the way close to 2,000 to 3,000 years ago in the time of the Roman Empire. This is where we really got the filibuster. The filibuster goes all the way back to Rome. And believe it or not, If you look at this their governmental system, obviously Caesar was the executive branch and the dictator, but they did have a legislative body called the Roman Senate. And so where we got the filibuster from, we get it all the way back from Caesar's time, where the Senate, way back when, thousands and thousands of years ago, used this filibuster strategy it was back then it was called talking a law to death. Believe it or not, talking a law to death. And what it mean is that people will stonewall Caesar's legislative ideas by using the Senate to just before it can get to the floor of the vote in the Roman Empire, was people in the Senate that disagreed with Caesar would just talk that law to death, to where it just was so exhaustive, people just left the law and walked away. Does that sound a little bit similar, even though it's thousands and thousands of years ago? So then we also began to see coming up in the, I believe it's the 1800s, where Great Britain and the Parliament began to use the exact same strategy called the filibuster, right? And this is before the United States is formed as a country. We still had 13 colonies. And so the filibuster was used by the Parliament House as well, was to talk legislation to death. They would just have individuals who would just talk and just have long-winded speeches, so long to where it gets so exhausted that people just gave up on the bill, and the bill would never get to the floor for a vote, and it certainly wouldn't get to the prime minister for signing that bill. And so now the United States come and adapt that same type of political strategy of the filibuster. So this is where we got it from. We did not make up the filibuster. I'm sorry. For those that probably thought that we were so wonderful that thought about that. No, that went all the way back thousands of years in the time of Rome. But what we did do is adopt those same type of practices. And it still has this pretty much the same type of philosophy, was to talk bills to death, have individuals who didn't agree with the law, the bill that was getting ready to be put for a vote. And we would appoint people on the other side of the opposing party, and they would just talk and talk and talk to do everything they can to discourage those bills to coming into fruition for a vote. And then we began to add extra laws and systems to where you had to have a superpower of a vote of not the majority, which was 50-50. If you had 51 versus 50, then obviously that bill would go forth. And they created, you had to have 60 votes to create this maximum majority, which meant that the strategy was, if this bill that we don't agree with, you don't have a chance of getting a vote, that means that 60 votes mean you would need you're going to need a few opposing party votes to be able to get that vote to the floor. So if you got all Democrats, you're going to have 50, and then you're going to need some Republicans to come on the other side to be able to get that vote pushed. So we began to do that for many years. One of the big things we saw in the United States history of filibuster, a lot of people don't know, is these were done in regards to slavery that helped keep laws in place and not be changed. We saw that in the civil rights movement. That was also making it hard to get the Voters' Rights Act, is because of the filibusters that would constantly happen, that we would make it so hard for votes to come to so hard for a bill to come to the floor for a vote, because you would have to have members of the other party vote in the same way. And so that was the whole point of the filibuster, is to make it so extremely hard by having 60 votes where anything will get through. These are the same things we are dealing with today. And this was a big deal when it came to the voters' right bill, is that we can't get it through having the filibuster. And the filibuster mandates in this particular, but there are some amendments and some exceptions. When it comes to budget issues, you don't have to have the filibuster. You don't have to have 60 votes for that. And I think that those were some arguments, could we make those amendments to where when it came to voters' right, could we do the exact same thing, which we never got to a decision on that. But the whole big picture of it all is The filibuster is designed to discourage new bills from the other side that do not want that to become a law. Use the filibuster as a way to draw out this process to where it just discourage people from even coming back to the table. And believe it or not, this has been very successful. This is the reason why we have the filibuster stuck in place, is because it has stonewalled so many very, very important legislations from even becoming law. So just giving you a little bit of history of it, why it's so powerful. And even though it's very discouraging, it is very effective for the other party. This is the reason why they have it. They make it extremely, extremely hard. Now, and let me throw another thing in there. The other exception was not just budget issues with far as getting passed through the Senate without the filibuster, but the Supreme Court candidates. If you notice, the Supreme Court candidates do not deal with a filibuster issue. It's divided evenly between 50 and 50 and not the 60 super majority vote.
Yeah, and one of the criticisms I hear about the filibuster, in last year and this year, is that they call it the relic of the Jim Crow era.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little more about that. You kind of touched on that with the voting rights bills in the 60s.
Yeah, so let me go back into that. So most definitely, the filibuster was in place to empower policies and legislations that were manifestations of institutional racism and structural and systemic racism. The filibuster helped keep those policies and legislations in power. In other words, if you wanted to repeal and address policies that was a reflection of racism in regards to slavery was one of it, and then obviously we got it emancipated, but Jim Crow, segregation, discrimination, all those things, the filibuster helped keep those laws into place and made it extremely hard to change those laws or introduce new laws that would fix a lot of those issues. So this is another thing where when it comes to African Americans and communities of color having an issue with the filibuster, it's not just because of voting laws itself, it's all of the other historical issues that have something to do with racism that strikes a chord with us. It really triggers our community of how frustrated we have been for generations on generations. And we've been telling people that racism is not just this ideology where people use microaggressions and use racial slurs. That's one part of it. The really difficult part that is really damaging in our nation when it comes to the communities of color is the systemic racism. It's the institutional racism. It's the structures that are intentionally designed and in place to marginalize, stigmatize, and disenfranchise generations upon generations in the community of color. So this is where it strikes a chord with us with the filibuster among people of color, is because we know that there is a racism ideology that is attached to the filibuster.
Just a question in the chat that goes a little bit off from that, but along with it as well. Naomi asked, just wondering whether you're aware of any collaboration or lack of between African American community, Latino community, and other Tucson communities. So is there any local collaboration, or is it something we're lacking?
I think it's both. That, like I say, when Mayor Romero asked me to come and serve on an advisory council, and I had the pleasure of creating the framework for it, and I called it the Race, Equity, and Justice Advisory Council. And that's a council where all of us came together, the communities of color, where we had strong representation from African Americans, from our Latino community, our Native community, and LGBTQ community. And so those are one of the things. I can't name, I would say, upfront as of right now, but I do know when it comes to social justice issues and civil rights issues, there are a lot of collaborations between the Black and Brown community that's doing some amazing things. Down at the Dunbar Pavilion is one that brings African Americans and Latinos. Again, the Urban League has a great platform with how we address the Black and Brown community, and not just bringing people together. Let me speak into the Urban League. The Urban League's job is not only to address the social justice, civil rights issues, but to deal with defining emergency needs, making sure people have housing, making sure people can get jobs and jobs training and get education and get the tools that they need to lift them from justice issues, socio-economic issues, and things of that nature. So there are many other organizations that are doing some great things, and maybe they're not even being as highlighted, but there are some great agencies and committees and programs that's out there that is bringing the community of color together.
Thank
Do we
you.
have any more questions from the readers? Oh, we got Stephanie Keenan is raising her hand here.
Oh, I'm not seeing that. Let me unmute her.
I just wrote it about 10 minutes ago.
Oh, and yeah, okay, you were just asking about her message, Kurt. Okay, I responded to that.
Oh, okay.
So
You were
Okay, so if there are no more questions from the readers, I have a question that's not totally about, or we have Mark Sorensen is raising their hand. If you can you write a question in the chat? Not able to?
I asked him to unmute. They have to accept it though. I can't. There we go.
Oh, okay, great. Well, I've been involved in politics since the first Watts riot, and I just have some suggestions. One thing is when you're confronting candidates from the other party, it doesn't do us any good to be asking them questions that they already know answers to. You ask them a question, in fact, you say it this way. I know you're a good guy. I know that you care about education. I know that you care about public schools and, healthcare and all of that. So for sure, I can count on you then on voting for blah, blah, blah that we are about. And put them, give them something to be intimidated by, so that they have to not just answer a question that they already know everything about, but that we're actually using some fighting words. Has it ever occurred to anybody that the other party is just banging us always, and we have no way, apparently, of fighting except with each other, and then complaining about it?
Yeah, I think though that can be a great strategy. Another thing that I would add to is that I think that candidates, once they get in power, they really don't have anybody that holds them accountable. And so I think that there's two things I think will fix that. Number one, and I've been working on that. I did that with our county sheriff, Chris Nanos. Been trying to work that with Laura Conover, our county attorney, is that every person that gets into political office should have some type of community advisory committee from members of the community, because it's going to be those members from the community that's going to help hold them accountable, remind them of the promises they made. And then the next thing I would say is that we need to hold them accountable to do town halls. Just because you're in office and you flying to DC and you're going up to the Capitol doesn't mean you're not going to be accountable. Town halls is very powerful. And you're talking about really galvanizing and scaring the hell out of somebody. Town halls will do it because they know at some point they got to get on that stage and they got to take those questions and they got to take what they didn't fulfill on to the community. And I think that's where the community members can have a strong, powerful, influential voice, is making sure if you are a state legislator, you are a state senator, you are a city council member. When the last time we did a town hall for Board County supervisors? When the last time we made them come to the community and represent their district, District 2 and District 3. Every district from 1 to 5 should have a town hall for the board supervisors and let them know that we're holding you accountable. We're watching you and we are listening. And if you don't get it together, you're going to get terminated. So those are very things that's low-hanging fruit that we can be doing real time. We can get a school auditorium, we can get a church multi-purpose room, and we can say, we, the people that elected you, want to have a town hall and we want to have a conversation. Yes, tell us some of the things you've done, but we also going to give you feedback on what you did not deliver.
I think that's a very interesting idea of having not only the town halls, but have every politician, you called it a citizens advisory board?
A citizens advisory board. You notice if they have advisors from all kind of people, but they don't have an advisor for the community. And that's low hanging fruit because it's the community that gave you your job.
Mm-hmm. And that would be interesting if those boards had an outlet to talk to the public.
Yep.
So they could say, hey, they're not meeting with us. They're not doing what they said they were gonna do.
That's right.
Very interesting. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we were approaching our hour here. Are there any other questions we have? Oh, we got more. Are you able to write those in the chat?
Oh, I can't see who has their hand.
We have Barb Savard.
Brian
I'm scared
Gross.
to death of these meetings. When I moved here, that was the year that Gabby Giffords got shot. And I am intimidated completely by the people carrying guns. I was shocked the first time I walked into a grocery store and saw a woman my age with a gun on her hip. And I'm terrified of those people. I just don't understand why they need to carry guns. And where are their religions, for God's sakes? It seems as though their religions are teaching them this too. I do not get it. I mean, Jesus was a peaceful person. I don't understand. I don't understand the need to carry a gun.
And so
I want to know where my rights are.
Mm-hmm.
When.
Yeah. So people have the right to carry guns, and that's very real, for sure. I personally, I'm very concerned by ads I see from politicians that are kind of glorifying violence, and that seems to be a genre almost now of using weapons in political ads. That certainly concerns me.
So we did have a question in the chat from Brian. Would it be appropriate for the paper to set up these town halls on Zoom?
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, the power to the people.
Yeah,
That's the power to the people. I mean, that's low hanging fruit that is missing. I mean, and the reason why I said is because I don't ask people to do something that I don't do myself. So as the president of the IMA, we do about 8 town halls a year. So Chief Kazmar, Chad Kazmar is our new chief. He's coming to the IMA to our town hall. We want to hear his plan. We want to hear what is his agenda. And then the people's going to tell him what our concerns are. That is low-hanging fruit. We do one for criminal justice. We do one for political action. So that means people who are running for political office comes to our town hall because they need to know that the community of color is really serious. And when and this is another thing, when we invite these leaders to our events, you better not come to our event talking about some general stuff. We want to hear stuff that matters to the communities of color. So there's nothing wrong with letting them know, don't come with that BS data and numbers to impress us and it has no deliverables to it. No, we want specific stuff that is impacting Latinos, specific stuff that is impacting Native Americans, it's specific stuff that is impacting our Black at-risk kids that is out on these streets, or dealing with the injustices with police brutality and racial profiling among Black and brown people. They got to come with it like that. And if they don't, we're going to hold them accountable as well. So when you also have these town halls, let the leaders get on the bus, but the community always drive the bus.
I'm curious, do you have these like periodically? You know, are you checking
every
in?
month? We take the winter time we take December and January off, and then in the summer we take I think it's July and August off. So between our off season months, we're always meeting at the Dunbar every third Monday at 6 o'clock. So yeah, so it was the same when we have an education town hall, and when we do the education town hall, we ask all our school board members, our superintendents from TUSD, Sunnyside, Amphi, Marana, all come to, and we talk about the issues that means the most in our community. Hold these people accountable. Every leader should have a community advisory board, whether you the county attorney, whether you're a board of supervisors, and if they don't, then you bring the idea to them. You know, when the last time your board of supervisors came to your event, that when they wasn't running for office, they just came to something that mattered to the community. My PhD is in psychology. And so to continue to keep doing the exact same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, we call it insanity. So let's stop doing insane things and let's start doing things that make sense. Grab these leaders from across the aisle. And I want a community advisory board. You should never make a decision in the community and you didn't even ask the community, was it the right move in the first place? Right? And then 2, have a town hall where they come before their whole constituent that vote them and put them in office. And you guys began to talk about the issues that matters the most. And if that politician is stinking up the place, you got to tell them, you got to put on some deodorant, bro. You're going to have to fix this. You're going to have to get it together. So I don't know why y'all inviting me, because I'm a little crazy. I'm smart, but I'm a little crazy. But I love people.
That's great. All right, well, I think that this is our hour is up here. Thank you so much for talking to us. This has been a pleasure and very educational. I very much appreciate that. And thank you to everybody who showed up. You know, your participation, I just very much appreciate that as well. And we will be having our next one as next Thursday. Is that right, Sarah?
Yes, that'll be the 24th at 2 o'clock.
Okay, wonderful. All right, well, thank you so much.
Yeah, if you all didn't hear earlier who our guest is going to be next week, we have Donna Jackson Houston, who is the founder and president of the Nogales Buffalo Soldiers Legacy Association. So she's actually the granddaughter of one of the Buffalo soldiers. So she will be fascinating to talk with and hear her story and learn more about those Buffalo soldiers here locally.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Have a good one.